The title and strapline of our budget this year is Investing in Our Island's Future, which links us in nicely with the Island Plan that has recently been approved by Tynwald. So turning first of all to the outturn forecast for the financial year that we're currently in, it's anticipated that income tax revenue is forecast to be $407,000 ahead of budget. However, this might actually turn out to be slightly more than that. We don't know yet. As always with these things, it's a ballpark figure. National insurance contributions, which actually excludes any agency income, is £1.9 million, up compared to what the budget predicted it would be. But there is a downside. Customs and excise is £22.5 million down compared to budget due to reduced VAT income in areas such as hospitality, which was due to the reduced rates during the pandemic. Other income is also £3.8 million down compared to the budget. And in terms of fund expenditure, we will be spending £17.5 million in the financial year that's drawing to a close over budget, and mainly, unsurprisingly, that's due to contingency COVID-related costs. So in total, the total expenditure in this financial year is predicted to be £31.9 million over where the budget expected it to be. So overall, we are expecting that we will have a deficit forecast of £36.3 million. The reserves stand at £2.1 billion, but of course, as always, that comes with a health warning, because £1 billion of that roughly is the National Insurance Fund, which is there for very, very specific purposes. The general revenue reserve stands at £462 million. So moving on to the background to the budget. It has been another challenging year, and I don't think that comes as a surprise to anyone, with, again, what not just ourselves, but also all nations around the world have been experiencing. Treasury did, in this financial year, recognise the challenges that we faced and the medium-term issues, and did take action to ensure sufficient funds were available, and that was through the issue of a £400 million sustainable debt bond in September last year, which added to the government reserves and allowed us to refinance structural debt across the MUA and also the steam packet. Positive note is we have very strong economic foundations coming out of the pandemic. We have a very robust economy here on Ireland, and it has continued to perform well despite the lockdowns and the restrictions. So we do, though, continue to face some challenges and risks, and this budget does actually recognise that and make financial provision accordingly. One of the key things to emphasise, which is up on the slide, is support. Government has continued to support both businesses and individuals with measures to limit the impact of the restrictions that we've seen from the pandemic, and support has been aimed at maintaining employment and also key industries. So for instance, there's been £12.7 million of support provided in the financial year that's coming to a close. There's been £12 million of salary support and £0.7 million of MIRA. And we've also, of course, supported businesses through the various grant schemes. So the total estimated cost of the pandemic in the financial year coming to a close is roughly around about £84 million, and that includes the support schemes which I've mentioned for individuals and businesses. On the very bottom of the economy slide, which we've just got off, but at the very bottom it mentioned about the VAT calculation update. The VAT agreement remains in place, and the indexation calculation is due to be reviewed again in 23-24, so we do have to flag up that, as normal, will be the review point. And the Manx Development Corporation is also been incorporated with the aim of regenerating brownfield sites to increase the economic values of those sites. So just some background to the pandemic financial support that's been given out. So the total across the pandemic to date stands at £133 million. The various split outs are there, but the headline across the two financial years, there's been £79 million of salary support. There's been strategic capacity scheme of £14 million, MIRA was 13, and the coronavirus business support schemes roughly around about 17 million. So there's been a substantial amount of support put in place both for individuals and businesses as we've been through the pandemic period. Sticking with those business support schemes, it's important to emphasise the fact that it's not just during the pandemic that we support businesses. There are existing business support schemes that continue outside of the pandemic as well. And there's the micro business grants, and what we have seen from those is 74 grants have been made under that micro business grant scheme, totalling 533,000, and that's supported 74 jobs. There's also been 126,000 across 45 business improvement grant schemes and 60 financial assistance grant schemes, which have supported 178 jobs in total. So the existing schemes that are not necessarily associated with the pandemic have also had an exceptionally beneficial effect on our economy and our employment. So the next slide just shows, from the point of view of the Department for Enterprise, how their support actually breaks down. So a total of 4.6 million has been allocated within the current budget in relation to the funding of grants. 3.8 million of that has been allocated to enterprise support. 500,000 has been allocated to the Visit Agency to support their activities of promoting the island as a destination to come to. There's 278,000 that has been allocated to the motorsport division. This year we hope to see the return of the TT, and we want to have a bigger and better festival to relaunch, and that money will help to assist with that. There's £40,000 has also been allocated to the ship registry in relation to Merchant Navy training. The next slide takes us through something that we've been speaking about quite a lot, and I've done quite a lot of interviews with many of you over the last few weeks and certainly the last month, and that is in relation to inflation. It is one of the risks and challenges within this budget, and I think the graph shows very clearly precisely the way inflation has actually gone. After going into negative territory, certainly CPI anyway, and just RPI towards the end of 2020, it's back up now in positive territory and over the 6% mark. So further increases we think may be seen in the short term, and that will of course put additional pressure on government both and also individual and businesses' finances. So in setting this budget, we've had to be very aware of the challenges that we face from that. We also have to recognise that inflation is a risk within the government's capital programme through rising construction sector costs, and provision has been made to ensure that capital schemes are able to be completed in the face of rising costs through inclusion of a central capital inflation budget of 13 million. So that is to help departments where their capital programme the reason they may be going over is due to inflationary costs alone. So departments, if they want to access that fund, will be required to apply to Treasury, and they also will be required to demonstrate that any cost increases are actually directly attributable to the effects of inflation. So it's not a general overspend, it is purely due to the fact that they've seen an increase in inflation. So moving on to jobs on the island. Employment in the private sector has returned to its pre-pandemic levels, which I think also further demonstrates the resilience of the Isle of Man's economy and the way that it has recovered strongly from the main pandemic period. And the second chart, just on the right as you're looking at it, breaks out the split of jobs within the private sector as at the end of the last year, December 21, allocated across the 4 agency categories within DFE. So 25% within the finance agency, 60% within business, 9% within the visit, and 6% within the digital. Now the next graph, which is one of my favourites, where there's an awful lot of triangles for you to look at, in the back end sticking with jobs, is that as of December 2021, there was estimated to be 736 individuals unemployed and looking for work on the island, and this compared to 1,201 individuals in December 2020. In December 21, there were 291 people claiming job seekers allowance, and that was compared to 756 a year earlier. So again, it shows the resilience of the recovery in relation to employment. The unemployment rate as a proportion of the economically active population registered unemployed in December 2021 was 0.7%. And again, if we go back a year earlier to December 2020, that compares to a rate of 1.8%. So it's extremely encouraging statistics for the island's economy. For anyone who's looking at the screen, working it out, the bottom line there is the job seeker allowance claimants, and then the lighter pink in the triangular-shaped bits of the graph is those working full-time, and also the darker pink is for those who work part-time, splitting out the numbers. So that phrase you've heard me utter quite a few times since I became Minister for the Treasury, the medium-term financial strategy. So Treasury has formulated an initial medium-term financial strategy to cover the term of this administration, and this will become clearer with the finalisation of the economic strategy. We've also got the Island Plan Department deliverables to come forward as well. So the strategy is to ensure policies and planning support for the island's economy, and the key objectives that we are looking to deliver is driving and supporting a diverse and successful economy, supporting existing and new business, driving inward investment, delivering and maintaining the highest international regulatory standards, delivery of a taxation system that supports economic aims of government and raises sufficient support revenue to support spending, and controlling public spending and promoting value for money through strong financial governance. We are going to continue to have to use the prudent use of reserves to support investment in public services and strategic infrastructure in the short term, and the plan is to reduce the resilience on the reserves in the medium term as this administration goes along. We're also developing long-term plans to support health and care spending requirements and also climate change initiatives, including encouraging external investment to help achieve the net zero carbon objectives as this administration has laid out. So in terms of the economic strategy, the roadmap to finalise the Isle of Man's economic strategy is in place and is laid out on the slide. So we're looking to work with key stakeholders, and the 4 key themes were identified to help form that economic vision for the island. That's being attractive to people, attractive to business, ensuring that we are tech-enabled, and crucially, also that we are sustainable. So phase 1, the research phase of the project, has been completed, and this has identified a range of positive factors and also some challenges that are present within the island's economy. So there's the performance of economic sectors, diversification, government reserves, the cost of living, which is again one we've spoken about with many of you over the last few weeks, and also quality of life. The phase 2 work is currently underway, which is investigating opportunities for the island's economy and developing the policy levers that can be used to release them. So the next steps will be to build a framework once the policy levers have been developed and agreed, to provide clarity on the island's economic objectives and to ensure effective delivery of the programme. So this will be built around the newly formed Economic Strategy Board, which will be chaired by the Chief Minister and also contain myself and the Minister for DFE. So, challenges and risks. Economic uncertainty has reduced compared to the previous 2 years, but there are challenges and risks that remain. As we've already discussed on one of the previous slides, there is significant inflationary pressures in all areas of the economy at the moment. The pace of economic recovery coming out of the pandemic remains a source of uncertainty. It's encouraging what we're seeing at the moment, but we need to see the long-term trends to make sure that is sustainable into the future. There is the possible labour shortages and demand reductions due to pressures on household finances. And also the government has committed to fund climate change initiatives, and that will need to be financed. It all has to be paid for somewhere, so there will need to be the money to back up those pledges. The other one from one of my former lives, as they say, is the recommendation of the Sir Jonathan Michaels report, which have been accepted by Tynwald, and this does include the requirement to increase funding to health and care services, which we'll be going into in a bit more detail on a later slide. There's also significant costs associated with the legacy schemes within the capital programme, which must be planned on the basis that the full programme will be delivered. Treasury has ensured that funding is available to meet the full delivery of the capital programme, which totals £485 million over the 5 years of this administration. Previous years have shown that actual delivery is lower than this level. However, we've considered that it's a fiscally responsible and prudent approach to plan as if the full delivery was going to take place. So I mentioned there about health and care and the Ireland's funding gap. Growth funding of £8.25 million will be required for the next financial year, in addition to the general pay and unpaid budget uplifts. The funding requirement for health and social care grows to £35.2 million in the 26-27 financial year, although again that has to come with a caveat, because this could change if inflation varies from the central assumptions over that period. An additional £5.08 million has been specifically allocated within contingency funding for potential cost pressures on Manx Care in the next financial year 22-23. Treasury approval, however, will be required before these funds are released. So it's not just a fund that's gone to DHSC to be used as they wish. They will require approval before the monies are released. And this amount in reality could be moved into base budgets, so the gap could be £5 million more annually going forward. So the cumulative forecast funding requirement is £105 million over the 5-year period of the indicative financial plan, and that's excluding the additional £5 million that we've just noted above. It is intended that the 22-23 growth funding requirement will be met by a transfer of national insurance investment income, subject obviously to the necessary legislation and approval within Tynwald, and this is intended to be a single year measure. There will be a process of consultation going forward to establish a long-term sustainable funding mechanism to meet the increasing costs of health and social care. So within this budget that we're looking at now, a total of £16.68 million of new revenue funding has actually been allocated in respect of health and social care for the next financial year. Another one we touched on before is climate change. Treasury is making funding available for climate change projects and initiatives to allow government to deliver on its stated timetable to achieve net zero carbon emissions. There's several areas of funding available within the current budget to allow climate change projects to be delivered. So we are establishing a new climate change fund, and that's starting off with a baseline figure of £25 million. There's also the Environmental Protection Fund, which will have £3 million within it, the Climate Change Adaptation Capital Budget of £9 million, and the Climate Change Mitigation Capital Budget of £5 million. Climate change is an issue that must be addressed, and a future funding strategy will be developed to ensure that sufficient resources are available to deliver the required changes. I do need to emphasise again something that I've stated in many media interviews, that government can't do everything around climate change. While government can act as a facilitator, we do need engagement with individuals and also the business sector to ensure that we can deliver on our targets. It can't be expected that government does the entire thing and actually also pays for the entire thing as well. We need to take a collaborative approach with society as a whole. So in terms of the bids this year, approved revenue bids, there's £314,000 to the Department for Justice and Home Affairs to fund the running of the newly established Sexual Assault Referral Centre. There's £2.74 million to the Department of Education, Sport and Culture to fund increased provision for young people with additional educational needs. There's 1.2 million, which we've referred to previously, to DFE, Motorsport Division, to support the return of the TT and Manx Grand Prix. And as we've said before, there's 16.68 million to the Department of Health and Social Care to support new services and growth funding for Manx Care. And just to emphasise again that this is in addition to general pay and non-pay uplifts, which have been included in line with other departments, and also includes the 5 million allocation within the contingency fund, which we mentioned earlier. £10 million has also been allocated to the economic fund to further support the recovery as we come out of the pandemic. Turning to capital. A new project development fund will be established with a £2 million initial balance. Departments will be able to bid for funding to conduct initial feasibility studies for new projects. This will then allow more accurate business cases to be submitted, showing rather than cases being submitted which may later be found out to be unfeasible. So some of the significant new capital bids that have been received and received approval are £830,000 to, again, the Department of Justice and Home Affairs for the construction of a new dedicated sexual assault referral centre, which includes £750,000 of the new cost approvals to complete the construction of this important facility. There's £5.9 million to DFE to continue the fibre optic network rollout in line with our plans to become a digital isle. There's £3 million to DOI to complete the upgrade of the King Edward Pier, £1 million to DOI to make improvements to passenger facilities at the sea terminal, and in case you're getting the DOI theme, there's also £1.9 million to DOI to complete the Balthain Gateway project. There's £972,000 to the Department of Education, Sport and Culture in relation to pre-contract and design fees for the new Castle Rushen High School, and £185,000 to the Cabinet Office to develop a new multi-agency border passenger data and intelligence system to help with border controls. Turning to taxation measures, it's proposed to increase the personal allowance yet again this year, and it will be by £250 per single person and £500 per jointly assessed couple. This will result in a personal allowance amount for the forthcoming financial year of 22-23 of £14,500 per individual and £29,000 per jointly assessed couple, reducing income tax by up to £50 for an individual and £100 for those jointly assessed. This is also expected to take 319 additional people outside the scope of income tax completely. Tax rates and other allowances are to remain unchanged. TT Homestay is proposed to become an allowance rather than a concession as it has been up to now, and the amount of the allowance will also be increased. The previous homestay concession will be replaced with the amount increasing to £2,350. Moving on to national insurance. Again, always got to caveat that, subject to the necessary legislative approval by Tynwald. It's proposed to utilise 8.2 million of the investment income from the National Insurance Fund to meet the health and care growth funding in 22-23. And this, as I said on one of the previous slides, is expected to be a single year measure. So it's not a measure that will repeat in future years. There's no changes proposed to Class 1, Class 2 or Class 4 for 22-23. The lower earnings limit will increase from £120 to £123 per week from April 22, and that's in line with the UK's increase to the lower earnings limit. Voluntary Class 3 contributions will increase to £15.85 per week. Again, that's in line with the changes that have been seen in the UK. A review of national insurance will be completed during the next financial year, which will include reviewing the funding for health and social care to create a long-term sustainable funding mechanism for that. Turning to benefits. The basic state pension and Manx state pension will increase by 3.1%. The pensions triple lock is being suspended for 1 year in line with the UK due to the potential distorting effects of the post-pandemic wage inflation. During the pandemic, many people were earning less than in a normal year, with many making claims under the MIRA and salary support scheme. As businesses and the economy opened back up again during 2021, then earnings began to return to a more usual level, leading to an abnormal level of increases in earning figures. So if we'd kept the triple lock in place, which is based around prices, in other words CPI, average earnings or 2.5%, then it would have seen an anomaly in the relation to the state pensions because of the sudden recovery in wage growth. So this was considered to be an anomaly that had the potential to distort the increase. So as a result, the earnings element of the arrangement has been suspended, and I must stress this is just for 1 year. You will also note on the slide, with the much bigger arrow than the others, there's a 15% increase to carers allowance being proposed. One of the things I've always been passionate about is trying to help those who help others. We know we have, and we know from the census figures, that we have a large amount of people out there caring for other people, and those that are in receipt of carers allowance often do very long hours caring for people at detriment to their own lives. So one of the things that we want to do is look at carers allowance in general, but in the meantime, with the short time frame we've had from this budget, we believe the way forward appropriate is to raise carers allowance more than we have in relation to other benefits, and that's why this year that will see a 15% increase to carers allowance to indicate our direction of travel. Income support, child benefit, EPA and JSA will increase by 5%, in line with the Isle of Man CPI index at September 21. The full rate of Manx state pension will increase by 3.1%, so that's from £196.14 per week. It'll take it up to £202.23 per week. So looking to the future, several reviews will be completed going forward to ensure the sustainable funding and spending plans are in place. The one thing that slide's not short of is the word review. The following specific reviews will all be undertaken. There's the economic strategy review, which will help to direct the overall medium-term financial strategy for the island. There's the national insurance system will be reviewed, which will include the review, as I mentioned before, of health and social care funding and how we make that more sustainable going forward. Social Security has already begun a transformation programme, and that programme of transformation will be ongoing to continue to ensure that the system is both equitable and affordable. The budget process itself will be reviewed as well, and the strategic infrastructure needs assessment will assist with the focus of the capital spending plans. We are also going to look to review the reserves policy to ensure their prudent use to maintain and support investment in services and infrastructure for the benefit of the island going forward.